What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Is Corbin Burnes a top 5 pitcher in D-backs franchise history? And is the D-backs having only one top 100 prospect a good or a bad thing?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, please follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked on Diamondbacks, both Twitter and Instagram, for the podcast handle. On today's show, we are discussing, is Corbin Burnes already a top 5 pitcher in D-backs franchise history? Is having only one prospect in the top 100 a good or a bad thing? Then let's take a look at some more free agents, some guys that I really didn't know where to place them. So I said some intriguing guys that I would like for the D-backs to bring in. So we'll discuss some more candidates in segment number 3. So I got a whole bunch I want to talk to you guys about today. But as always, thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I'd not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. All right, let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss, is Corbin Burnes already a top 5 pitcher in D-backs history? Now, obviously, he has yet to play or pitch for the D-backs, so we're not saying guys who have played already in a D-backs uniform has he produced at his top 5 level. That's not what we're saying. We're saying for guys, when we look at their career plus their talent, is Corbin Burnes a top 5 guy to ever don a D-backs jersey? Because I wrote down some names here that you guys could consider. I definitely probably forgot a guy or two, because these are guys, I guess, really at any point in their career, if they pitch for the D-backs, how good are they when you look at their talent when they were in their prime, what their career accomplishments and accolades were? Because I want to know, is Corbin Burnes like a top 5 pitcher to ever wear a D-backs uniform? Because again, the D-backs franchise, not very old. I'm 27. D-backs franchise is 27 years old. So it's not even like they've had this long history of having even elite pitchers in their building. And so that's why I thought this was such an interesting question to ask and exercise to do, because I was going through the D-backs franchise leaderboards and I was like, you can make the argument Corbin Burnes is a top 5 pitcher in D-backs franchise history. And there's a decent amount of ball clubs as good as Corbin Burnes is, you probably wouldn't say that because of their history. They've probably had other Hall of Fame pitchers in the building. Like, for whatever the reason is, like, Corbin Burnes is barely a top 5 pitcher in the Dodgers' current rotation, right? Like, that's how loaded the Dodgers are. And he's probably a top 5 pitcher in the D-backs franchise history. But let's actually discuss and talk about it, because I actually did like a quick power ranking of the top 5 D-backs pitchers in their franchise history when combining their career accomplishments plus their talent. And you guys tell me if you agree with my top 5, and we'll see if Corbin Burnes lands in it, because I think we all agree number 1 is Randy Johnson, right? When you think of talent versus talent plus career, Randy Johnson might be number 1 among all pitchers the last like 40 to 50 years, right? If you're under 50 years old, you might think Randy Johnson is the greatest pitcher you've ever seen, because one, he pitched for like 20 plus years, right? 1988 to 2009, the man pitched. He led the league in strikeouts like 8 times. He's got 5 Cy Youngs. He won 4 straight Cy Youngs with the D-backs. So he's the best pitcher in D-backs franchise history. Got us the World Series MVP. Like, Randy Johnson is one of the GOATs. He's probably a Mount Rushmore pitcher of all time. So he's definitely the best pitcher in D-backs franchise history. That's not even a conversation. After that, I mean, you could also tell me if you guys think my ranking of just the top 5 D-backs pitchers is kind of crazy, because there was some conversation within my own head of, is that guy really better than that guy? Was that career of that pitcher better than the career of that guy? So number two, and this is really where we could start arguing with my list, but I have Curt Schilling, Randy Johnson, Curt Schilling, always going to be tied together. I think Curt Schilling is a Hall of Famer. I think it's insane that he's not in. Obviously, super controversial figure off the field. I know it, but the dude was dominant. You look at the numbers, he was a workhorse. He was the strikeouts were pretty insane as well because he was such a workhorse. I mean, we do 250 innings pitch plus per season. Yeah, you're going to have 300 strikeouts, which he did a few times in his major league career. Plus, he was also a guy that pitched 20 years. Like, if you're going to pitch 20 years, be like between a 3.5 and a 2.8 every single year during that time, win a World Series for a new franchise, be a workhorse, rack up the Ks, have also like the Randy Johnsons, the Curt Schillings, is not just their talent. They also have these games and moments where they just have come up huge in the biggest spotlights. I think that matters. Randy Johnson doing it for the D-backs against the Yankees. Same with Curt Schilling. Plus Schilling went to the Red Sox, had stuff like the bloody sock game. Like those two guys, their legacies I think are super strong. I think Curt Schilling, number two, is fine. Number three for me, this is where I put Zach Greinke. I think in terms of talent, you could maybe have Greinke above of a Curt Schilling. Greinke did win a Cy Young, and Curt Schilling did not. But when I think of Curt Schilling, I just think of those big postseason moments, big postseason games. Maybe talent-wise, Greinke was better, but if you're asking me who I trust more in like a Game 7 of a World Series, I'm taking Curt Schilling. So that's why I have him number 3 on my list. Number 4, again, this is where it gets kind of controversial. If you guys think my ranking is kind of crazy, because I think you could have Corbin Burnes as high as number 4 on my list. I think my top 3 for pitchers in D-backs franchise history is pretty cemented. And you could even argue number 4 is pretty cemented because I have Mad Bum over Corbin Burnes. I know Mad Bum was terrible the last few years in Arizona with the D-backs, but you go look at Mad Bum's first decade, 12 years of Major League Baseball, and he was a stud. He had multiple stretches. Like he had like a 4-year stretch where he was sub 3 every single season, 200 plus strikeouts, not 200 plus strikeouts, 200 plus innings pitched, definitely 200 plus strikeouts as well. We know 3 World Series, right? He's a guy that on the biggest stage, you want Madison Bumgarner on the mound. I think Greinke was better in terms of talent, but in terms of the big game stage, Mad Bum was definitely better. You could flip-flop the two if you want. I just think Greinke, I think the talent is enough to separate the two, but because of the postseason resume Mad Bum has, I think you have to put him at number 4. That leaves us just one more spot to put Corbin Burnes in our top 5. Considering he is a Cy Young Award winner, he's got, around 200 innings pitched the last few seasons. He's been a strikeout machine as well throughout the course of his career. But for Corbin Burnes, the thing is, his prime actually hasn't been that long. Like Corbin Burnes' breakout season was the 2020 year where you didn't have that long of a sample size, right? He only had 59 innings pitched in 2020. And so when you really look at Corbin Burnes' career, and like his prime, it's really just the last 4 seasons. It's really not that long of a sample size of Corbin Burnes being dominant. And when I compare that versus a Brandon Webb, I think I have to give it to Webb, because Webb, we all know, one of those guys, when you mention guys who you have forgotten about because their career was cut short because of injuries, guys who could have been even better if their career wasn't cut short, Brandon Webb is like at the top of that list, because you look at his career, 5 of his first 6 seasons were better in terms of WAR on Baseball Reference than Corbin Burnes' Cy Young Award season. So in terms of being dominant in a short period of time, Brandon Webb might have had the best first 6 years of anyone. Rookie of the year. He didn't win Rookie of the Year. Finished 3rd in Rookie of the Year as a rookie. Still a 2.84 ERA and 180 innings pitched as a rookie. And then he also finished 2nd in Cy Young voting twice during his first 6 years. Another season won it. He was a guy that averaged 226 innings pitched per season his first 6 years. Average of 5.6 WAR throughout his entire career. Like, this guy was flat out insane, and Corbin Burnes is nasty. He's a stud, but we can't overlook Brandon Webb. And so right now, Corbin Burnes is an honorable mention on the outside looking in of the top 5, but he can definitely make his way into the top 5. But he also has to contend with guys like Zach Gallen, who's still out there and dominating for the D-backs, and a guy like Dan Herron. Don't want to overlook him either. Workhorse as well for the D-backs. And so Corbin Burnes, if he can continue on the path he's on, the trajectory he's on for a few more years, he can probably pass Brandon Webb and be in that top 5 of D-backs pitchers in their franchise history. But right now, he's on the outside looking in, because my top 5 in order: Randy Johnson, Curt Schilling, Zach Greinke, Mad Bum, and Brandon Webb. Now we'll discuss if it's good or bad that the D-backs only have one prospect in the top 100. We'll discuss that in segment number 2.
From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel is the app that is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Whenever the Suns are playing, give me KD over on 25 points, give me Booker over on 25, and give me the Suns money line. When it hits, which is not very often, it brings a big smile to my face. And if you want a big smile on your face, just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss the top 100 prospects by MLB.com, because they just updated their top 100 prospect list, and there was something interesting about it when pertaining to the D-backs, because we know Jordan Lawlar is a top 100 guy guaranteed, right? And the thing is, when looking at the top 100 prospects, Jordan Lawlar's in there at number 11, technically moved down just slightly, was number 9 when I last looked at it yesterday. Now he's number 11. He's really, technically, if you want to be honest about it, he only moved down one slot, because the guy at number 1 right now is Roki Sasaki, who is a fake prospect. And so he's number 1 right now. So Jordan Lawlar realistically only moved down one spot. And if you really think about it, they don't view him any differently as they did before. And one thing I did find kind of interesting, Marcelo Mayer, the future of the Boston Red Sox, he is now ranked behind Jordan Lawlar in the top 100 prospect rankings. But Lawlar, only Arizona Diamondback prospect ranked in the top 100. His companion used to be Drew Jones, but ever since he got drafted, where he was like, what? I have to go back and look at where he was in the top 100 prospect at the time he was drafted, because he was like a top 15 guy or something. And since then, it's mostly been due to injuries, barely playing. And now Drew Jones is outside the top 100 prospects. And so for him, we still believe in his talent. We still want him to be, we still hope he can be his father one day and still show off that potential 40 home run, 40 steal caliber profile he has within him. But right now he's on the back burner. And we're just being patient with Drew Jones. The most we're hoping for right now is a fully healthy season from him. But I think when looking at the top 100 prospects and saying, why don't the D-backs have more guys in the top 100? I actually think it's okay that they don't. I actually think it's a good thing and a positive sign that the D-backs don't have more top 100 prospects. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, how can that be a good thing? It means that they're not drafting well. It means that they're not like developing talent. Like, I don't think that's what it means at all. I actually think it means the opposite. D-backs are drafting and developing talent so well that the reason they don't have a lot of top 100 prospects is because so many of their prospects end up graduating and helping the D-backs on the major league level. Just look at the D-backs top 30 prospects from 2 years ago, just 2023, just 2 years ago, not that long ago. And tell me how many of these names you guys have heard and seen on the major league level. Corbin Carroll, Jordan Lawler, Brandon Pfaadt, Ryan Nelson, Dre Jameson, Blake Walston, Blaze Alexander, Slade Ciccone, Jorge Barrosa, Dominic Fletcher, Justin Martinez, Dominic Canzone, Carlos Vargas, Bryce Jarvis, Yulbert Diaz. You know what? I literally just named 15 prospects from the top 30 list 2 years ago. And all of them have at least played on the major league level. Like, think about how insane that is. How many other teams in the sport can say half of my top 30 prospects from just a couple seasons ago have already graduated and played and contributed to a team that either went to the World Series in 2023 or a team that led the league in runs scored last year? We're looking at Arizona last year, right? And look at their offense and the reason they scored so many runs. Yes, they missed out on the postseason, but when the D-backs were cranking last year and we felt good about the team and we thought they were going to make the playoffs, what was one common sentiment and one take that we consistently had on this podcast, especially when dealing with so many of the random injuries throughout the year? One thing we consistently said is a big reason the D-backs are getting hot, keeping afloat in terms of winning, staying pace with the rest of the wildcard teams is because of the tremendous depth that they have, right? Gabriel Moreno goes down. Adrian Del Castillo steps up. A guy like Geraldo Perdomo goes down. You had guys like Blaze Alexander for at least a couple weeks to begin the season. Kevin Newman step up. Guys like Randall Grichuk step up. I mean, I'm just talking about overall depth at this point. But if you're actually talking about the young depth, like, yeah, Adrian Del Castillo and guys like Yulbert Diaz and the Blake Walstons all stepping up. We even had like a little Jorge Barrosa this past year, and the times Blaze Alexander was good for the D-backs definitely mattered. Like, the depth of Arizona's farm system has been so important to them the last few years. The reason you don't see more top 100 prospects by Arizona is because they play their prospects, they use their prospects, and you lose your prospect tag when you play too much. And I think the D-backs wouldn't have more top 100 prospects if they play their guys less, but I think a part of the reason why they're not as evaluated maybe some of these other teams is because you're seeing them on the major league level and still not in the minor league level. But I would like the D-backs to have at least a couple more blue chippers. I would like if guys like Drew Jones ended up, panning out. But at the end of the day, when looking at these top 100 prospect rankings and valuations, remember, these guys, these scouts that do this for a living, they still don't know what they're doing. They spend hours looking at tape, looking at film, talking to these guys. And even after all that, we still don't know anything, right? You can still pull up a top 100 prospect list. Let's pull up like the 2023 top 100 prospect list and see who's at the top and who's actually like dominating. I will say, for the sake of my argument right now, the 2023, the top 10 looks pretty good. Gunnar Henderson, Corbin Carroll, Francisco Alvarez, Jordan Walker, Anthony Volpe, Andrew Painter, Grayson Rodriguez, Jackson Churios, Marcelo Mayer, and then Ellie De La Cruz. I mean, that's a pretty strong 2023. And you know what's funny? Drew Jones was number 15 in 2023. So that tells you how far he's fallen, right? But again, you can look at some of these top 10 lists from over the years, and it is just so hit or miss, especially some guys who are considered like can't miss prospects, right? You think of like the Brendan Rodgers, who was like a top 20 prospect for like a half decade, Joe Adele, like all these guys who are considered can't miss prospects. And guess what? We missed on them. It happens all the time in Major League Baseball. And so, yes, the D-backs may not have any top 100 prospects right now, but that could be because the scouts aren't doing their job, or it's because the D-backs graduate all their prospects. We don't just keep them sitting in the minor leagues for years on end, I guess collecting experience, maybe raising their value. But at some point, if you're 28 and you're still in the minor leagues, you're probably not going to make it as a major leaguer. D-backs would much rather just see what you have on the major league level, see if you can contribute to the team. If you can, you stick around. If you can't, it's bye-bye. So love the fact that the D-backs don't have a ton of top 100 prospects, because it means those guys are playing and contributing on the major league level. But would still love guys like Drew Jones to turn back into a blue chipper. Now we'll discuss some intriguing free agents that are still out there that could help out the D-backs in segment number 3.
In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offers one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage up to $5 million, no medical exam required, and it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. SelectQuote, they shop, you save.
All right. Back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let's discuss some some free agents who I found were intriguing. Didn't know exactly what bucket to put them in, so I put them in the intriguing bucket pile. These are free agents who are not exactly top of the line, but I wouldn't say they're bottom of the bin either. These are names that you probably heard of, the guys that you definitely know. Maybe they got some flaws or question marks, or maybe they're guys that are like, why are they just sitting out there, right? Like, they're obviously good. Why haven't they been picked up yet? So these are some intriguing free agents that I think could definitely help out the D-backs. And a couple of these guys we probably already discussed before, but I think it's always good mentioning and bringing up again so you can have a reminder of who's still out there and who's still quality that the D-backs can get. Because the first guy who I think is interesting is a David Robertson. I want one of these Texas Rangers pitchers. It sounds like Kirby Yates could be going to the Dodgers. If he's not, I'm hoping it's Arizona. But if we don't get him, give me the other Texas Rangers pitcher who is old but still good. Yes, David Robertson is going to be 40, but guess what? Still had a 3-year rate last year and still averaged 12.4 strikeouts per 9. He's been double-digit strikeouts per 9 his entire career, and he's been a 3-year rate or less the last 3 seasons. Like, David Robertson is quietly and underratedly one of the best pitchers we've had in baseball over the last decade plus. Like, David Robertson's a career 2.91 ERA in 16 seasons as a reliever, 11.8 strikeouts per 9. I don't think anyone thinks of David Robertson as like that elite of a guy. He's not going to make the Hall of Fame as a closer or anything like that. He does have a 177 career save, so he could be the D-backs closer if he needed to, but this is one of those guys that's going to be forgotten about, lost in Major League history, but was a very good high-end reliever for a decade plus, and I think it would do the D-backs a great deal of service if they were able to acquire the services of David Robertson. Another guy in the same mode, little Carlos Estevez, who played a little bit on the Angels and Phillies last year, has mostly been on some pretty bad teams with the Colorado Rockies and the LA Angels, but thankfully he got to play a little bit with the Phillies last year. But being a guy that has spent a lot of time in the NL West with the Colorado Rockies, he's familiar with the opponents out here, and I think he's a guy that's a lot better than what he was in Colorado, because we saw him first year outside of Colorado, or excuse me, his first 2 years outside of Colorado, 2023 and 2024. What happens? Immediate All-Star in 2023. And then last year, a 2.45 ERA. This is a guy who has decent strikeout numbers, not great strikeout numbers, but pretty solid. The best thing about him is when you look at that whip from last year, this was a guy who did not give up basically any hits at all. 6.2 hits per 9. The walk rate was pretty solid, but mostly it was the fact that he just did not give up a lot of contact to hitters at all. Being a guy that has like 50 plus saves the last 2 years, I don't think Estevez is actually like a great closer. I think he's pretty good. I think I would trust him more as a setup man. Like David Robertson, I would trust more potentially as a closer than Estevez. I would much rather Jamar or Puck, I think, to be the closer. But if Estevez is one of your setup men to a Puck or a Jamar, I think that would go so far for Arizona. Estevez, Puck, Jamar is a nasty trio in the back end of your bullpen. I would love him, and he's probably a lot cheaper than some of those other high-end closers of the, some teams like the Dodgers are signing and the Tanner Scotts of the world. This next guy, this would be for DH. He is definitely in that intriguing category because he's probably, in terms of his player profile, a little controversial. Patrick Wisdom. I don't know how you guys feel about him coming off a terrible season where he had a negative WAR, but if you look at Patrick Wisdom the 3 prior years, he is obviously a monster power hitter, right-handed bat, which would go good for the D-backs and play a bunch of different positions defensively. I don't know if he's good at any of them. His biggest issue is he doesn't hit for a very good average and he strikes out a ton. But if you can get that version where he also hits home runs, kind of like that A. Eugenio version last year, right? I would take that as your DH potentially if you're right-handed DH. If you're just coming in to do the Randall Grichuk role, play around 90 games and just try to hit as many home runs as possible. And I do think Patrick Wisdom is intriguing. Maybe a little backup first, maybe a little backup third as well. Not great defensively, but can at least do it. I don't hate him as a intriguing power option DH right-handed bat for the D-backs, but I also it's not gonna bring a big smile to my face either when it's like, oh, we got Patrick Wisdom. It'll be one of those, it's cool, kind of how I felt about Randall Grichuk. Like, it's cool, and then by the end of the year, I'm one of the biggest Randall Grichuk supporters. So hopefully the same could be true for Randall Grichuk. And then finally, the last guy I want to discuss, he used to be a top prospect, was the main piece, arguably, in the Chris Sale trade to the Boston Red Sox. Yoan Moncada, who has had such a weird up and down career, has barely played the last few seasons due to injuries, only has one season where he really displayed like great power, one really breakout year. That was 2019. It was pretty good in 2021 as well. But for Moncada, he can play corner infield. He has some pop. I think he just won't be that expensive. Still a guy that's under the age of 30. Is he a flawed player? Yes. Does he have some talent? I guess. Does he have some pop? I guess as well. But I do think he's in that intriguing mold where, can you get that 2019 version out of him? Probably not. 915 OPS. That was probably like the best we'll ever see out of Yoan Moncada, and we'll probably never see it again. But can he give us something close to 2021 where he was a 4-win player, 14 home runs, a 787 OPS? Like, maybe if you could get that version of Yoan Moncada, I do think he's a pretty intriguing player, but I'll stop there. That's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back next week for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy.